What up, y'all, man? So look, we're gonna talk top recruiting budgets. I'm not gonna lie, it's a very intriguing list. Now, I am a little bit surprised, y'all, that Texas isn't higher. And where is Texas Tech? Nowhere to be seen. Now, with as much money they've dealt out, obviously this is 2024 recruiting budget. I thought it would be more. Now, let's start at the bottom. Now, I'm gonna be real. I'm not too surprised on this side when it comes to Georgia Tech because they really got some high-end recruits in that 2025 class. I'm not surprised that they spent some pretty good money to land these guys to come in, right? And the reason I say that is because they got a Tay Harris, they got a Dalen Pinson, they got five-star Josh Petty, right? They got Peyton Joseph. They spent a pretty hefty penny to bring some of those guys in. So I'm not too surprised to see them do that. Now, South Carolina, they have a decent recruiting class this year. The year before, though, they definitely did a really good job. So not surprised to see them at $1.9 million. Them obviously recruiting at a high level and spending that kind of money to bring in high caliber talent. Doesn't really surprise me. Ole Miss, they've kind of been hit or miss. They've more so been hitting the portal. They've been getting a couple guys, obviously, in the class, but not to the level you usually see Ole Miss commits like 4-star, 5-star players. They've been lacking on that end a little bit, but a little surprised to see them with them obviously hitting the portal really hard. No surprise to see Nebraska because remember they got Dylan Raiola, who's now a sophomore. Spent a pretty good penny to get him away from Georgia, so I'm not surprised to see them spend $2.1 million on the recruiting class. If you're Minnesota and you're the Rutgers, you definitely want to start seeing this money pay dividends, right? Because they have been at the bottom for the most part of the Big Ten. You need to see these teams perform at a higher level with how much money they're spending on their recruiting. Doesn't make sense. Now, obviously, with 12 and 11, Oregon, we know what they've been able to get the last few years. The Corian Moore, right? We know what they got obviously a few years before. They recruited at a high level, and they get some of the top players in the country. No surprise they're spending that kind of money. Same with LSU. Now, LSU's been kind of tough because they've had the number one receiver committed twice and the number one quarterback committed, and both have ended up flipping. So interesting to see there. They may have to change their verbiage a little bit in order to kind of stick out a little bit more. They're obviously putting the money and effort in, but sometimes the top recruits are going elsewhere. Now, obviously at $2.7 million, go look at Florida. Florida this past summer, they were on a recruiting streak. They had landed, I think, like 4 players in 4 weeks. They've been doing an outstanding job bringing in a top class almost every year. And they're not just recording the state of Florida. They're getting guys from Baltimore. They're getting guys from Maryland. They're getting guys from California. They're getting guys from Georgia, right? They're getting guys from Texas. And they're doing a really great job. Next up, Washington. They're spending a pretty hefty penny. You know, they haven't been in that relevant conversation, but they've been high in some preseason polls. Want to see, obviously, this money is $2.8 million, obviously translate. Now, Penn State does make a lot of sense because what they've been able to get, they get a lot of good blend of high-end 4-star players into their program, which makes them a really good team. And you always see them have a dominant edge rusher for whatever reason. Just signed a deal with Adidas, which helps their NIL component, similar to what Tennessee signed with Adidas. I think you'll continue to see them spend more money. No surprise to see Clemson spend $3.1 million. Remember, this wasn't a team that hit the portal. They're big on getting the guys out of high school, developing them in order to play. So I'm not too surprised to obviously see this from them and spend that kind of money because that is kind of what they're known for. Now, Texas has been in that conversation of spending money, obviously, on recruiting at a high end. So no surprise to see them spend $3.6 million. Definitely are trying to get in the top guys, and we've seen them nab some guys from Georgia in their recruiting battles. No surprise there. Not surprised by Oklahoma either. Georgia's a little bit surprised because a lot of fans are saying that Georgia's cheap when clearly they're not. They're spending $4 million on their recruiting class. That definitely says a lot, y'all. And I know a lot of people are like, well, Georgia didn't get Tyler Atkinson because they didn't want to spend the money. Or they didn't get this 5-star kid, James Johnson, because they didn't want to spend the money. They're clearly spending money, so that has nothing to do with it. Georgia's spending a pretty hefty penny to land some top guys. Texas A&M, again, no surprise either with what they've been able to land. Some top guys from Georgia, Jordan Carter, Aaron Gregory, spending a bag. I'm not really surprised Texas A&M is on here. They're getting top guys from Texas as well. No surprise. Bama, we've seen what they've been doing. It's just a physicality thing. We see how they're spending their money. They're still getting top-end guys, even in the Kalen DeBoer era. No big surprise. Last but not least, that is a little bit surprising. I thought Texas would be up here. I thought maybe Texas Tech would be up here. So a little surprised to see Tennessee with $5.3 million. Now, look, they've done a great job. They had some top 10 recruiting classes under Coach Heupel. They've been doing their thing. They've been a really good team, you know what I'm saying, the last few years. $5.3 million, though, that did surprise me just a little bit, man. That's my thoughts. That's my reaction, man. Top recruiting budgets per program, obviously doing their thing. And shout out to Tech for even being on this list at $1.9 million.